Welcome to Arakko Public Radio, your weekly dose of X-Men comic chat. I'm Rod, and this is the Diddy Kong to my Donkey Kong, and by that I mean the way cooler one, my one and only co-mega mutant, Keegan. This week we are talking Axe Judgment Day number 3 and Marauders number 5. Before we get into it though, at the request of some of our viewers, I've got a challenge for you. A can you finish the limerick challenge since we're public radio. Alright, let me get my limerick reading voice on. Halfway through Judgment Day, it's dour. The new Celestial has a lot of power. Druig is mad. Jean Grey is sad. But we're all waiting for...
Magneto's hour.
There we go!
Of course.
Did you know we still have a 2-week wait for X-Men Red? I feel like they're going like 6 weeks between issues here.
That's gonna kill me. That's gonna actually kill me.
I'm so glad you got that. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, that has to be.
And I think I technically cheated because I think the only reference we've got to it called it the Hour of Magneto, but there's not a ton that rhymes with Magneto.
Yeah, exactly. And Magneto's hour just sounds good, so I like it. Absolutely, I saw that comment this week, and I was like, ooh, this could be fun.
Yeah, I need to look into what other games from wait, don't tell me we could actually translate. But until I figure that out, expect a limerick every week.
Okay, let's.
Are you want to jump right into Judgment Day number 3?
Let's go.
Open moments after the end of Judgment Day 2 with Ajax and Makari reasoning how could they have made an unjust god, with Tony blaming himself. The Celestial decides to judge Captain America first and declares him a failure, since he strives to inspire the country and the country leads a flailing world. The other characters freak out, realizing if Captain America fails, none of them have a chance. We check in with the civilians from last issue, except Arjun, who's replaced by his widow. Druig visits Uranos in the excursion for advice. Uranos insists any deviation is excess deviation and should be corrected, so wiping out all life is the right answer. He also suggests that since Captain America failed, so will the Eternals. Druig agrees to resume the assault on Krakoa, though he thinks the planet still has time to pass the test. Iron Man is planning a way to kill the Celestial, and Ajax protests. Phastos is more willing to humor the idea, but explains that due to their principles, the Eternals will be forced to defend him once they enact their plan. Mr. Sinister calls a quiet council meeting by psychically reaching out to Destiny, coincidentally right as Xavier dies during the psychic battle. Destiny lays out the opportunity to destroy the Celestial and the fact that it would involve sacrificing many human lives in the explosion, and forces a vote. With Professor X dead and Storm on Mars, the villains, joined by Hope, outvote Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler, and Colossus. Destiny also makes it clear the X-Men tasked with carrying out the mission won't be briefed on the danger. On Krakoa, the mutants are nearly overwhelmed, but are joined by an unlikely ally, the Deviants, led by Crow. With the Deviants guarding Krakoa, the X-Men set off to carry out their plan. Iron Man and Phastos discover Mr. Sinister has leaked the weakness in the Celestial and doomed millions. The Eternals, all of them, activate and begin defending the Celestial. In the all-out melee that follows, we see casualties on both sides, but Jean successfully gets to the node as Iron Man arrives moments too late to stop her. Celestial goes boom, and everyone is wiped out. Just for it to be revealed that the entire battle was a figment created by the Celestial. All sides realize that simply killing the Celestial is not on the table. Captain America rallies Tony and the Eternals that the only way forward is the whole world pulling together. This gives Cersei an idea. She heads to the excursion with Jacks of Knives and sets free Star Fox.
What an issue.
This is the fastest moving big crossover I can remember. I'm biased because of my X-Men love, but this is my favorite event comic in a long time.
I'd have to agree. Like, as an event, I am wholly enjoying it. It doesn't fall flat for me, and that's rare. I'm not usually a big event person.
This marks the halfway point if we're counting just the main crossover. Like, I think there's more tie-ins in the second half than the first half, so we're not really halfway through it, but we're essentially halfway through the story. And there hasn't been a lull yet. Like, usually there's the jokes about, like, oh, it's a boring middle issue. I had a boring middle issue yet, I would argue.
No, absolutely. The most middle thing about this issue is that it is almost exclusively moving things forward.
Absolutely. I kind of want to start at the end. Just my first reaction was that the reveal fell flat, but the more I thought about it, I liked it. What do you know of Star Fox
Um,
or Eros? In case anyone's like not following his Avenger years, this is
right.
Thanos' brother Eros. His
Yeah.
superhero or Avenger's name was Star Fox.
Yeah. I know, of course, that he's Thanos' brother. He has the power of, what is it, like emotion manipulation and
Yeah.
persuasion, essentially. Kind of a creep.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Like, part of me, because it was Harry Styles in the film, right? In the Eternals movie that played him. I'm wondering if we're bringing him in here to kind of finish off, kind of retconning out the less pleasant parts of his power set. Because, yeah, his powers are basically stimulating pleasure in others. And, like, that has been played for creep factor or things that are less kosher now. But I feel like they're not that far off from being able to translate that into a more socially acceptable power set, if that makes sense.
No, they absolutely can. They can do the work to make it so that it doesn't become a problem.
You didn't read Eternals, so in the very first issue of Kieran Gillen's Eternals, we got the list of all of the Eternals and like who was in which faction. And part of it was we had all of the excluded Eternals, and they all were just labeled like excluded and their first initial. And there was a lot of speculation that excluded E was Eros. Um, there is now only one Eternal unaccounted for that's in the exclusion, and it's excluded H. So a lot of the speculation is Hyperion, but I'm really curious to see who it ends up being and if it plays into Judgment Day or if it stays a thread to be pulled on later, because Kieran Gillen is planting seeds early. Like Eternals 1 was over 2.5 years ago, so
Yeah, that's long term. So it'd be interesting to see how long that reveal actually is.
want to jump back to the beginning of the issue?
Yeah, certainly.
I want to talk about like the rules of judgment here, because we've got Captain America getting the thumbs down, and Uranos talks on it a little bit, but essentially, uh, the logic we're presented is he fails at his own expectations of himself, right? So, and the only one we know past was Crow. So, logical extension, you could see Crow as living up to his ideals because he is taking care of the deviants just the way he wants to. What would that mean in the long term for the rest of our cast here? Because we've seen, what were the other two listed? It was Emma Frost failed and somebody else failed, right? So we've gotten a handful of people we know whether they passed or failed, and so far everyone we've known for a long time has failed.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting because it is kind of based on what you believe yourself. But
Yeah.
it's like, are you able to have low enough standards for yourself that you can already fail that?
Well, and it's interesting because it doesn't quite line up with what was presented at the end of issue 2.
Yeah, it is an interesting rule set. I wonder if it's going to get like fleshed out a little bit more as we go.
Whether that'll be here in the main book or like we've got, like I said, we got a lot more crossovers coming, so maybe we're gonna hear a little more in the crossovers. I did notice, and this might be jumping, so you can pull me back if it's jumping too far away. In the one page we got revisiting the human characters, uh, the tone of the narration shifted to a much more friendly. The Celestial almost felt like he was relating to the humans in the way he described their intentions and their actions, and it's starting to plant a seed for me that this might be a crossover that isn't solved by heroic.
That's a good point. That's actually a really good point. Like these six and how they judge themselves. And let me. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, take a look at
Given
that
those
page because it multiple
rules.
times. I don't remember the exact wording, and I'm pulling it up now. But multiple times it references like "and I listened."
For instance, Arjun's widow. Um, she cursed me with all her heart. I watched.
interested. Yeah.
On top of that, like Katrina, right before that, isn't living up to her own expectations of a social media post. Is that a judgment that they're setting up for her? Like,
that is totally fair. That is true.
Disappointing numbers. She hoped for more distraction. Instead, she sits with sleepless. She sits sleepless with her anxiety.
Well, and then like when it's talking about Kenta and his father laughs and leaves the room with a smile. It disappears instantly. He judges himself.
It's a much kinder view of everything, I feel like.
Absolutely.
And the others that were judged, I looked at it. It was Mystique and Destiny.
When you think back on all four of them, they do all have high expectations for themselves in leadership roles, or in Destiny's case, in leading us to the correct future. I don't know that my notes are in order here, so I might be jumping around on specific moments. But line of the issue, my favorite line was Emma Frost's "Hope we need another Xavier." I thought so. I don't even know that we know for sure like what Xavier was facing in that moment. We know it was another psychic battle, but because we already saw in issue 2 the first psychic fight end, and then Droog decides they'll resume the assault. So I'm hoping Immortal X-Men or one of those series is going to flesh out how Xavier dies there. But the timing of he dies, we call a meeting to make a giant decision, and we don't have time to replace him.
Yeah, pushing through that vote, like, ooh, that's evil
shit. Shady stuff. I want to talk about morality in war in the X-Men.
Okay.
So we know that they've got extra husks of Xavier. If you knew that it was all on the floor for the X-Men, like this was the moment, why not just activate a dozen of them at once?
Yeah, I mean,
if you've got the backup, we've seen that they can like plop you in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why you have a general rule against that, but we've seen them throwing rules to the wayside.
True. I mean, can it work that, multiple can exist at the same time?
Like they say that they have a rule against it because like that you have to see a body, you can't just have someone be missing because they don't want to produce that situation for like moral reasons. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they have to make a rule against it for moral reasons would imply they have the physical capabilities. And if they're just downloading off of Cerebro, I don't know, like Waiting Room, that's a whole nother story that we still really need to address at some point. Yeah. But you should be able to theoretically, like it's just like pulling it off a flash drive, essentially, right? Just, I'll just make 6 copies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to like the question is like, is it a thing where they are able to replicate like not just the memories, the personality, all that, but like right. the soul that pilots the actual vessel as well?
Sure, you right. get into Legion of X territory where you get into more of the philosophical stuff.
My Kurt Wagner is showing. Yeah.
So right after that moment, Hope sides with the likes of Shaw, Sinister, and the gang. And even I appreciated Emma abstained at least, that she didn't jump in and vote for genocide. But
I mean, Ev always playing both sides, right? Yeah. Always trying to look out for number one. That's Emma to a T.
So would Daddy be proud? Like pragmatic to a fault, but I just can't see Cable making that same choice if he was in that same position.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, he would. I guess he is King Pragmatism, but it just seems like there's gonna be repercussions for her not in that moment. I feel like making the more.
I mean, it's
empathetic
the risk, right? It's like you said, would Dad be proud? It's bringing Phoenix, that gamble. It's the same idea, this gamble.
You know what? I didn't even think about the Hope scene in the context of Phoenix, because later we see Jean basically having PTSD about Phoenix, that she freaks out about the vision of or the hallucination, whatever you want to call the scenario that the Celestial puts up through, where she inadvertently causes the death of billions. Like you see her just bawling afterwards. She's in full freak out because she's reliving the fact when she actually did cause all that destruction.
Yeah.
And so it is an interesting dichotomy that didn't even dawn on me, that Hope, when presented with essentially the Phoenix choice all over, sided with the kill him. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're really going Cyclops was right as hard as we possibly can on some of this.
Yeah, wow. Okay, happier stuff. That fight scene once the Eternals got activated. Dupe cameo. Firestar literally ripped in half. Like one of the better fight scenes I can remember in a while.
Yeah, no, it was a really good fight scene. I enjoyed it a lot. Just
Do
like
we want Rod's nitpick corner, or do we want to wait for the end?
we can go for it right now because I mean we're here.
Last issue of X-Force was all about them mourning the fact that Quentin Quire has been deleted from Cerebro, deleted from the waiting room. We cannot revive Quentin Quire at all. He's in this fight scene, which definitely takes place after that X-Force arc.
Yeah.
You can hand wave it because it was a vision of the Celestial, but kind of, because this is still supposed to be all of them living through it, right? There's living through it inside the mind of the Celestial and stuff. So that's just like an editorial like mess up, right?
It has to be a mess up because like the thing is like okay, let's say that we're hand waving it and that it's because the Celestial put it in there, and maybe it's because the Celestial didn't know, even though it's a god, didn't know that they can't get Quentin Quire back. Okay, fine. Let's say that. So you mean to tell me that nobody looked over and goes, "Oh, that's Quentin. Wait, what? There's something wrong," you know?
Well, it's not like it's a bunch of nobodies. Like all of the big name like X members are there. Beast is there, so like someone should have been able to. That's weird, guys. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I will say that is my only nitpick for the week. So
which
compared to last week, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a tight couple of issues if there's only really one.
I do want to go back. We talked about how Crow passed Judgment, but we didn't talk about the Crow scene where he talks to Cyclops about, we made it through your gates, like, because Cyclops was trying to deny that they are not the mutants are not deviants, and it was a little bit of a throwback to I think it was Eternals 11 or 12. It was towards the end that they reinforced and maybe established, at least reinforced, that the mutants are descended from the deviants, but apparently whatever genetically makes up the deviants is close enough to an X gene to work those gates.
And like honestly, like no matter what, I love the fact that Crow, like even though he's being told like, "Oh, we're not deviants, we're not like you," his response is, "Anyone on the wrong end of an Eternal's Thurgic Lance is deviant enough, as far as I'm concerned."
Crow has so quickly become a favorite character of mine.
Straight up, like he's just so good. I love his entire attitude.
Speaking of different Eternals characters and the way they're being utilized, Jack of Knives and the entire Trix gang, like openly and vividly working both sides, like having zero loyalties, is just such a great addition. Because we've got this three-way war going on, and then you have this band of for-hire mercenaries that not care less, and is only in, like, the entire universe could end here. Like, everybody on the planet Earth could go away. All they care about is making their bank. I love it.
They truly are like soldiers of fortune to a T, and it's just so good. I love it.
I'm really hoping we get to see more of the rest of it, because we always hear Jack, like, the Tricks, but we only really see Jack and Knives. So I want to see his whole gang, like, I want to get to know him because that is great stuff.
Oh,
Another more dialogue I wanted to talk about. Mr. Sinister just dropping bombs again. Uh, Tony has figured out that he snuck the X-Men or the Krakoans, the means to take down the Celestial, and Tony turns, millions could die, but billions will definitely live. They won't thank us, but we're mutants and we're used to that. You can say please and thank you later. Well, maybe you can't, as if it goes wrong, you'll be dead and I'll resurrect, so toodles maybe?
it's just so good. I love it because he just plays this ridiculous villain so well.
So beautiful. I love it. Yes.
To an extent, like he's not wrong, right? It's
Yeah.
but billions will definitely live.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same argument that the rest of the council members make, but
Yeah,
there's
the
something
exact
about
same
when
argument.
Sinister presents it. I also love him orchestrating things, but still, like, he doesn't show up for the vote. Like, he has zero like hands dirty. His hands are still clean in effect. Let's call this Keegan's trivia corner. It can go with Rod's nitpick corner.
Yeah, no. So yeah, like my little bit of trivia is I've looked it up before because it's one of those things that's always curious to me. Is that his name is Star Fox, and I loved the video game series Star Fox as a
Absolutely.
kid. Star Fox 64 was one of those ones that I ran through hundreds of times.
It was the first good 4-player multiplayer, I'm pretty sure.
That multiplayer was incredible. But like Star Fox, like the code name Star Fox came before the video game, which I just find like to be a very interesting, like maybe it's parallel thinking, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just find that very interesting because Eros and Star Fox, he was 71, I want to say.
Oh wow, I didn't know the Star Fox name went that far back. Very
I think
cool.
so. I could be wrong. Maybe email me if we're wrong, but I that's as far as I'm aware.
Okay, I always just assumed they were different enough, like comic books versus video game, and like he's not an anthropomorphic fox. Although there is a variant cover coming out with him as an anthropomorphic fox, but
Of course,
that's how they got away with it. But that's good to know that the comic came first, because
yeah,
I could see Nintendo being pretty litigious if it was the other way around.
very much so.
Marauders number 5 opens with the 5 resurrecting Xandra after she psychically sent her memories and genetic code to her dad across the galaxy. Professor X explains he'd always revive his daughter. Meanwhile, Aurora and Dakin fight the Kin Crimson in the present. We then see the rest of the team in the past, namely the 1995 issue X-Men number 43, with the Acolytes watching things unfold. The team interrupt a fight between Exodus and Apocalypse's son, now named Nemesis. Cassandra Nova reveals she has healed the brain-dead symbiote Zzz she picked up a couple issues. Venomized Nova easily holds its own against Nemesis while the rest of the team secures the time drive. In the present, Dakin kills Chronicle of the Kin Crimson. The Marauders return to the present with the original mutants. They are met by Deathbird, who has Delphos in shackles. When Delphos brags about killing Xander a few issues ago, Deathbird slaughters her in raid. Upon returning to her empire, Xandra honors the surviving Marauders for uncovering the secrets of the Kin Crimson. And once she's revived, Bishop asks Kate to go meet the newest member of the team, Cerebra, here from the X-Men 2099. First off, talked about it last week. I did not like the anime art. I was really into the art this issue.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a really pretty book.
It was a really pretty book. I was really enjoying the art.
Actually, I will be honest. This issue made this whole arc click for me a lot more.
I'd have to agree completely.
I was really worried with the last issue that we were getting sent into kind of a time travel arc, like a longer time travel adventure. I love that it was a succinct. We got through it and popped out.
Yeah, a nice quick time heist.
Yep.
I do agree though. Like this made everything click now. Like I'm like, okay, I'm on board.
Kind of like Star Trek does this sometimes, where they'll do a travel back in time to an arc or an episode in that case that wasn't necessarily that important, and almost elevates like that story by being like, oh yeah, this thing happened there the whole time, and you just didn't see it in the background. And I really liked that aspect of this issue. That I haven't gone back and reread it, and just from one note I saw online, like I guess some things don't line up, but that like at least in the fuzzy memories of the '90s, this totally fit in and was just a true time heist. I love that.
Yeah. No, I like that when it's like the Bill and Ted theory of time travel, where it's like you go back and like you're the reason why this ball was thrown and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, we talked lines of the issue. Mine goes back to the very beginning. Xavier, like, looking lovingly at his daughter, and you cried out as only a telepath, as only an Xavier could. And then he talks about how he could only, like, he would always revive her no matter what. Uh, Loved the line, but how do we feel about how he's playing favorites with his kids here?
I mean, very much so, huh?
Like, for all the hell he's bringing down on poor Legion and Presandra's, a little bit of narcissistic daddy there if you want to get into real world parallels.
A little bit, like yeah, it's there. That was a good one. I liked that, and it definitely playing some favorites with that. I think for me, my line of the issue comes later, and it's Dokken when he's like, so the only thing between me and killing you for good is pain, old man, and pain's just a challenge. Enjoy whatever hell you people believe in, Chronicle, and when you get there, let them know who sent you.
So good.
It's
So
just
good.
like very good action hero stuff, and I love it.
I will say, it's not quite nitpick corner because they do like explain it in a way that makes sense, but I don't understand the logic behind the whole like, well, they have the pocket dimension to keep, but Chronicle wasn't like he wasn't keeping his heart in the pocket dimension for reasons. That whole thing seemed really convenient. Like,
Oh,
just they had to kill him, so they found a way to let him kill him.
incredibly convenient. Absolutely. It didn't make much sense to me, but then he gave such a good speech. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. As my go-to, I don't know, expert, my go-to fan of the symbiotes, my symbiote connoisseur, if you will.
Yes.
How do you feel about Ziz's and having super evil Cassandra Nova already probably overpowered with her own pet symbiote?
I thought it was fun.
I loved it. That was such a
I
cool
love it.
scene.
I love symbiote stuff. Unlike Peter Parker, I just love it.
Well, and I did look. Apparently, Ziz's did exist. It was like a Realm of Kings, like super side character that. So it wasn't completely pulled out of the ether. It was
Yeah.
a very, very tertiary member of the symbiotes already.
And I want to say that they've had a few different names. One of it was ZZX, and then there was like ZZXZ, and you know.
Well, I won't feel bad about lazily just calling them Ziz's.
Yeah, it's whatever. But it's fantastic. And then passing off the symbiote at the end, just that good. I liked all of that.
So, talking, going from you being a connoisseur, we can now talk about 2099, which
Yes.
I was way too into as a kid for the quality of the line on average. What do you know of Cerebra?
Moderate amounts, not a ton. So dazzle me.
Interesting character. I have not read Orlando's Exodus completely, so I don't know like what the new version of her is, because they really, when they were wrapping up the 2099 line, they threw away a lot of characters, and Cerebra was one that they definitely just tossed aside. It seems like this looked like young Cerebra to me. Now, it could have been the art style, but I think we're going back ways. Her power set's really cool though, because she basically can activate other mutants. So like she ends up against, say, Iceman. She could freeze him, or she could make him freeze something else, or she could, or like Magneto, she could start like activating his magnetism, and he gets stuck to a wall or something. Like, it's a power set. I don't think we have anyone on Krakoa currently that has anything that resembles it, and I think it'll be a really cool addition for just the zaniness of the Marauders team. is a cool move.
No, absolutely. Like being able to activate someone else's X gene involuntarily could have incredible implications.
It was played pretty seriously a lot of the time in the 90s because everybody was too serious in the 90s. But I could see Orlando playing it with a little more humor and a little more quirky fun, and it could be neat. I think it's a nice move.
I think so too. That'll be fun to see how it works.
All right. So we talked about this week's issues. As we said, we're halfway through Judgment Day. So I think it's time we talk about not the next crossover because that's Dark Web, but we're halfway through one crossover. Let's talk about the next crossover. Then we got the first teasers for SOS: The Sins of Sinister.
I'm into it.
The byline: a new world, a new disaster. How twisted will mutant kind become when Mr. Sinister achieves victory? Let me ask you point blank. Is this Age of Apocalypse, but with Sinister's dystopian future?
Maybe. I think that's definitely like a very strong possibility.
So, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces with him right now. We've got all the Chimera stuff. We've got the fail-safes he's got to turn back time. We've got Moira. We've got the Vault. Although I think the Vault's going to be saved for whatever's after this. But we've got the Vault, which the early teasers with the S and the O that looked like the Orcus O, I actually thought this was going to be the Vault story. But we're going to the Sinister stuff first. Do you have any predictions to throw out there?
I don't know. I think it's impossible for me to have a prediction worth anything without knowing how Judgment Day ends.
That's fair. That's the thing with these solicitations of like when you literally have a crossover in between. And I know Dark Web is more a Spider-Man crossover, but it's gonna tie into all the X books. It's where Moira's at. Moira's like the big bad right now until Orcus hits off. So like Dark Web's gonna be important.
Yeah, unfortunately so. I think the thing that like has me hung up on like needing to know how Judgment Day ends is part of the byline being a new world, and I'm like, you don't get much more new than the entire world going under judgment. So,
yeah. Can I throw out my prediction?
Yeah, hit me with it.
All right. So do you remember issue 1 of Immortal X-Men? We got the Sinister Secrets. It was like it was a single page that had, and so far each one has telegraphed what each Immortal X-Men issue was going to be about.
Oh.
So I think Sinister ends up in the pit, and that's what basically sets him off in whatever sends him into taking over.
I mean, yeah, if anyone deserves the pit, it's probably Sinister.
Let me rattle these off to you.
Okay.
And this is still like where we just got Immortal 5, right? So we still have a few before we get here. I'm starting with issue 10. The Sinister Secret is, finally, someone who actually deserves it gets thrown in the pit. Good riddance. Issue 11. Oh no. Issue 12. Help. Just help me. It stretches on, endless and cold. Infinity balloons, and a scream is too big for my head. This is a hell of my own making. Hell is other people. Hell is also me. And then 13 plus, which just implies like from 13 on, everything is fine.
So, I mean, yeah, so interesting. That 10, 11, 12 is so interesting.
I am so excited to see where this goes. And I mean, that is not a for sure thing. That is not saying for sure he's getting pitted, but sounds to me like he's getting pitted.
Well, I mean, so 12, right? You said it was what? Help me, it goes on, it's endless and cold.
Yeah.
That's what
very
Sabretooth was describing it first before he started turning it into his own private hellscape.
Yeah.
So that tracks. If one of Sinister's secrets is about how endless and cold something is, then I would assume the pit. The only question is is he the person he's referring to, and he says, someone who actually deserves it, or is he
someone
going
else
right after someone?
Yeah. I can see going either way.
Mm-hmm. it's going to be cool. I'm excited. Anything with more Sinister, I'm excited for. He's one of my favorite villains in mutant kind.
Well, I just love that Kieran Gillen is taking charge, like, because he had to weave his way through X crossovers 10 years ago. Like his first reign in the X-Men was him having to make the crossovers they wanted good, and this
Mhm.
feels so much more like he's like, you know what, I want them to go up against the Eternals. You know what? Give me Sinister in charge. Like it really feels like Kieran Gillen shipped this time, and that part has me really excited.
Yeah.
Like I am okay with these X crossovers. If we get 2 or 3 a year, that's fine. If the writers get to tell stories they really want to tell, if it's not editorial mandate, if it is literally these guys coming up with really cool crossovers, I'm like, yeah, I want some breathing room in between for us to actually see character development. But the cool thing about Krakoa is we have enough books. My class, we have enough books that to we don't have to involve everybody every time.
Right.
So, like when Dark Web's happening, some of these books that are super involved in Judgment Day will have some breathing room until SOS kicks off.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's really the big thing is right. Like crossovers. The thing I hate most about crossovers is when they really mess up a good book. The first thing that comes to my mind.
Dark Web taking over Venom and Carnage in a couple
Uh,
of months. I'm so
yeah.
freaked out about
Here's
that.
here's the thing is my boy Venom keeps getting messed up by crossovers because I will never get over what they did to Donny Cates with the War of the Realms and having to incorporate that into Venom.
Well, and then when you go back and you read it 10 years later, you're just stuck with this weird interlude in the middle of a run. I
Yeah.
hate that when that happens. All right, I got a new segment for you. Every week, we're going to ask a question and solicit community answers either in the comments or they can email them to us at araccopublicradio@gmail.com. Next week, we will discuss your answers and share our own. This week's question, in honor of Sins of Sinister and the possibility of it being a alternate future story where he takes over. What villain would you want to see win? If we could see anyone win long enough to see their dystopic future before it's inevitably undone, of course, who would it be? Send your answers in. We want to hear them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the answers on this one. There's a lot of really interesting villains with really interesting plans out there. So
Okay. And I would love for them to be X-Men related, but if you've got a really good one that's just Marvel or even just comic books in general, send them in. We want to talk about a few answers. All right, and I think all we have left is to talk next week.
yeah, a couple more next week than usual.
Yeah, we're back up to, we got 4 books hitting next week, including the grand finale of Knights of X. We've got X-Force 31. We're literally getting 2 X-Force issues before we get another X-Men Red. That just seems like sacrilege.
Seems unfair.
X-Men 14, another one that we just got last week. And then Gambit number 2, which is that series in the past. I'm reading it. It's Chris Claremont, so I won't have a ton to say, but I will report back whatever
Yeah.
it happens.
I read the first issue, and it certainly was a comic book.
All right. I think that does it for us this week. Thank you all for hanging out, chatting all things mutant with us. If you haven't hit subscribe, please do, and follow us on all of the socials. I'm That Nerdy Papa Bear on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and Keegan is Bulk Ranger on Twitter and TikTok.
Yes.
And musical cue.